to whom were the gospel writers writing? Now, we are a church which is committedly and unashamedly dispensational in our theology. And what that means, just to boil it down for our purposes this morning, is that through our commitment to a consistent, literal, grammatical, historical approach to the reading of the Scriptures, we believe that the Scriptures plainly teach a distinction between Israel and the church, and that there will be a future for a restored national Israel. God's not done with Israel. And what that means practically is we don't read Old Testament passages through the lens of the New Testament. I'm railing constantly about not reading the Bible backwards. We don't find Jesus on every page of the Old Testament. And we don't confuse the New Testament church, which wasn't started and founded until Acts chapter 2, with Old Testament Israel. So I want to set the stage with that. But now I'm going to say something that might ruffle some feathers. Because there are certain individuals within dispensational circles who I would call hyper-dispensationalists or ultra-dispensationalists. And what they'll teach is that the Gospels, like the 4 gospel accounts, don't apply to Christians today. And the argument that they'll make is that because the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were writing about a time, namely Jesus' earthly ministry, before the church existed, and since today we're living in the church age, the Gospels don't apply to us. Rather, what they'll say is that the only thing that we need to read and the only thing we need to hear and the only thing that governs our lives as church age saints is what's given to us in the church epistles, what was written to the churches later through the pens of Paul and James, for instance. I'm not with that line of argumentation. Just let that be said. And neither should you be. And here are a few reasons why. First, I concede that the ministry of Jesus on earth, meaning the very life of Christ recorded in each of the 4 Gospels, did take place before the Spirit came and before the church was established. But let's not forget that the gospel accounts, what we have as the Gospels, were written after the church had already been established. The church was established, Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, somewhere around the year AD 33. The Gospels weren't written, the Synoptic Gospels weren't written until like the years 50 to 60 AD, and the Gospel of John wasn't written until the 80s or 90s AD, meaning that though the events in the Gospels took place before the church age, the Gospel writings themselves are a product of the church age. The Gospels, in other words, are church age documents, just like Acts, just like the epistles, just like the book of Revelation. Second, though Jesus' words, as recorded in the Gospels in their original context, undoubtedly were directed to the Jews of his day, we can't forget that everything given to us, meaning the church in the Bible, in both the Old and the New Testaments, in all 4 Gospels, is profitable. 2 Timothy 3:16. All Scripture is breathed out and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness. It doesn't say just the letters of Paul. Numbers is profitable. Malachi is profitable. Esther is profitable. And guess what? Luke is profitable as well. Everything written in the Bible, Old Testament and New, is written for our instruction so that we might grow in respect to godliness. And as Romans 15:4 says, so that we might have hope. Romans 15:4 says, for whatever was written in earlier times was written for our instruction, so that through the perseverance and the encouragement of the Scriptures, we might have hope. Third, let's not forget that the New Testament epistles, specifically the epistles that are addressed to churches, the very epistles that the hyper-dispensationalists will say are our only legitimate source of authority in the church age. Well, those epistles include, guess what? The teachings of Christ. And where do you think Paul got his ammunition, so to speak, as he wrote those letters to the churches at Corinth and Ephesus and Philippi? Where do you think he received and developed his doctrinal convictions and statements from Christ? Christ is the cornerstone of the church, Ephesians 2:20. The apostles were taught by Jesus, and they passed along his teachings, the very teachings, by the way, we see recorded in the Gospels, in the letters they then wrote to the different churches. In other words, there is nothing wrong with going back to the source, ad fontes, to the words of Christ himself in the Gospels to consider how we ought to live and function as his followers today. Now, pop quiz. Was the Sermon on the Mount written to the church? No, it wasn't. Were the Beatitudes written to the church? No, they weren't. Were the teachings of Christ as recorded in the Gospels spoken directly to the church? Were they addressed to the church? No, they weren't. The church didn't exist at that point in time when Christ said those things and issued those words. But are the teachings of Christ as recorded in the Gospels for the church? Without a doubt. Absolutely they are.